Dear viewers across the world, most welcome to my channel NAGA World Conflict Zone. Context: Israel's apex predator, finally devoured by his prey. Benjamin Netanyahu's public appearance in the past few days had ranged from fear-mongering to historical and pitiful. Israel's prime minister resembles an aging predator that had lost its power to catch prey and instead grumbled about being turned into prey himself by those who want to replace him. After 12 years in power, Netanyahu was truly convinced that no one but himself is qualified to lead the country. And although he had been unable to emulate his idol in Moscow and tweak the constitutional arrangement, he had expertly manipulated Israel's political systems and exploited Israeli relations with the Palestinians, as well as the rivalry with Iran, for far too long. Now, not completely without justifications, he accuses Naftali Bennett, who is edging closer to the coveted job of prime ministers, of U-turn and deceit. Bennett learned this foul behavior from none other than his former master during the years when he worked closely with Netanyahu and was on the receiving the end of it when he broke rank with Likud and set up his own party. Netanyahu's customary tantrum in which he accuses everyone who does not want to join him in a coalition of betraying their creed and their supporters and trumpet himself as the great leader and defender of Israel against all enemies reflects the distorted state of mind of the current prime ministers and underlines the urgent need to bring his time as prime minister to an end with immediate effect. Netanyahu can blame only himself for the situation he is in. Had it not been for his thirst for absolute power and his intention to tolerate to successor, had it not been for his obsessions with manipulating the political systems, had he not been corrupted by power and expected other to foot the bill for his lavish lifestyle, and had he behaved more as statesman and less as a politician, he could well have presided over a stable right-wing government and for a longer period. Instead, a younger generation has now outmaneuvered him at his own game and is within reach of the reign of power. It could be argued that regardless of Netanyahu's record after 12 consecutive years in power and 15 years altogether in top job, it is time for a new leadership with new ideas and new directions. In the paradoxical nature of the Israeli politics, which reflects the diversity of Israeli society, the past few weeks of violent clashes between Israel and the Palestinians on almost all fronts almost saved Netanyahu from having to move to the opposition's benches. If anything, the cruel treatment of Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah, the insensitivity toward East Jerusalem during Ramadan, and the denial of their right to vote, the eruption of violence between Jews and Arabs in mixed cities inside the Green Line, and 11 days of bloodshed between Israel and Hamas that achieved nothing but death and destructions, all testify to the fact that Netanyahu has passed his sell-by date and should go. However, in the atmosphere and discourses that evolved during his years in power and was supported and encouraged by the close-knit henchmen. However, in the atmosphere and discourses that evolved during his years in power and was supported and encouraged by his close-knit henchmen, whenever violence erupted, the leaders would tolerate no questioning of his policies, which is why when on the eve of the violent clashes with the Hamas, the so-called change bloc was on the brink of forming a government that for the first time since 2009 would not have included Likud or been led by Netanyahu. The negotiations to attain this were abruptly halted. This was mainly due to Beneath, who was too scared to continue the talk while hostility with Hamas raised. This was the first of his flip-flop and the reversed his decision when a ceasefire was declared. In the meantime, it was down to Yair Lapid, leader of the centrist Yesh Atid party, to play the role of responsible adult. Despite winning 17 seats in the general elections, 10 more than Benit's Yamina, he has agreed to a rotation government with Benit, in which the latter will serve as prime ministers for the first 2 years. This was a calculated risk by Lapid and paid off. The following the ceasefire, he tempted Bennett to return to the table and negotiate for a government without a Likud and without the ultra-orthodox parties. If this coalition agreement is supported by a majority in the nation, and there is always as if knowing how desperate Netanyahu is at this stage, then Bennett has little to lose from a narrow electoral base on that does not guarantee that his party would cross the threshold for entering the Knesset. If a new government is not formed and a new election is called as a result, he has the opportunity to present himself as a national leader, and his party is one that is capable of leading a government. It is Lapid who is taking the bigger risks. In Israel's volatile politics, 2 years are an eternity, and the government in which he is expected to serve as a foreign minister will comprise diametrically opposed view on almost every issue of importance, may not may not last long enough for him to become prime minister in 2 years' time. He may hope that should the government not survive to run its full course, he will still be rewarded at the ballot box for his irresponsible statesman-like behavior in putting the country above his personal interest. It is hard to imagine Netanyahu accepting the new coalition's agreement with grace. He is now a badly wounded animal who is struggling not only to remain in power but more importantly to disrupt his corruption trial and by that avoid a possible jail sentences. Hence, for now it is all about reaching the finish line and ensuring that in condition of appalling incitement, hate speech and panic campaign orchestrated by Liquid and Netanyahu, a vote of confidence in the new government will take place in the Knesset, one that will allow the country to move on from the deliberate, divisive, and increasingly disruptive Netanyahu era.